The Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be moving into chapter 8 this morning. So if you would, turn with me in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 8. As we discussed in our first chapter, the Gospel of Matthew is unique in the sense that he's presenting Jesus as the King of the Jews. You know, each one of the Gospel writers had a different purpose, a different point of view, a different angle of Jesus, and a different, a different reason for writing. For example, Mark, when he was presenting Jesus, he was presenting Jesus as the perfect servant, serving our need. Jesus came to meet our need, to serve our need. And then Luke's gospel was presenting Jesus as 100% man, in fact, the perfect man. And so Luke was more interested in the healings that Jesus performed. And John's gospel, on the other hand, Luke was presenting Jesus as 100% man. John's gospel, on the other hand, was presenting Jesus as 100% God, 100% deity. So each gospel writer had a different reason, a different purpose for writing. Matthew, as we get into this, we're going to see him. He's not writing in a chronological order. He's writing in such a way to establish points as you go along. So, Luke was written in the exact order. What Matthew's doing in this case, he's going to take all these miracles, and that's what we're about to get into. Take all these miracles and lump them together. Because in the first 4 chapters, what we've seen is Jesus presented in his person. And then picking up chapter 5 and going all the way through chapter 7, we see his principles. So he's taught these principles. But does he have the power to carry these principles out? Does he have the power? Does he have the authority? And that's what we're about to see as we get into chapters 8, 9, and 10. He's going to be demonstrating his power. And what an awesome power. So we're going to be picking up this morning in Matthew chapter 8, verse 1, as we see 10 miracles here. That we're going to see 10 miracles lumped together, and it's all speaking of Jesus' power and his authority. Now, no doubt, Jesus is a healer. He brings about healing. He brings about physical healing. He brings about spiritual healing. And so, but what I want you to understand is, as we get into this, and Jesus is going to make this declaration about his authority. And in fact, I think it's in chapter 9, maybe chapter 10, he will say, so that you know I have this authority, I'm going to command this man to get up and walk. So it's about his authority, it's about his power, and it's about us trusting in his authority and trusting in his power. So we're picking up Matthew chapter 8, verse 1. Is my mic too loud? I asked that last week, and then I realized why it sounded so loud. The AC units, or the heating unit's not running, so it's abnormally quiet in here, except for the ruckus there in the corner. So, but we'll bear with that. When Jesus came down, chapter 8, verse 1, when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him, and a leper came to him. This is bold in this leper. He's coming to Jesus. Because the lepers were isolated from the rest of the world. In fact, they couldn't be within 150 yards of anyone. They lived in their own community. They were looked down upon. The Jewish establishment, the religious establishment says, they were cursed of God. And they had to be separated from other people. And so, but this leper is coming to Jesus. And like I said, he's coming to a rabbi, a known rabbi. He's making bold steps to come to Jesus. Now, the thing about leprosy, and this is in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, make clear that leprosy is a picture of sin. Leprosy, when it's first detected, it's just like a very small blemish under the surface of the skin, a little white dot. but it spreads. It spreads outwardly. But it's something that comes from within, just like sin. It comes from within. We're not sinners because we sin. We're sin because we're sinners. We're already sinners. It's within us. It's in our nature. It's in our character. So we're not sinners because we sin. We're sinners because we... Did I say that backwards? We sin because we're sinners. But leprosy, it's a small blemish. And just like sin, if it's not dealt with, this leprosy, if it's not dealt with, it will eventually destroy the person. And that's the deal with sin. It's something that must be dealt with, or ultimately it will destroy us. And so, like leprosy, it begins to spread. And as it spreads, it begins to numb the body. It's just like we can become numb to sin over a period of course of time. But leprosy, again, it would begin to spread, and someone with leprosy would eventually, over a course of time, lose their digits. They'd lose body parts. They'd just fall right off. And one of the reasons for that is because of the numbness, people didn't realize they couldn't feel pain. And pain's good because it tells us to stop, or it warns us, we're in danger. But, someone with leprosy, they have numbness. And so, it was reported, somebody could pick up a red-hot iron, cherry red-hot iron, and it'd have no effect upon them, except they lose their fingers. So it would eventually destroy the body. Another thing about leprosy is that it caused the body to be foul. I mean, you could smell a leper from hundreds of feet away. It was just this odor that was emitting from him. And so they lived in isolated, separated from everyone else. So here's this leper, and there's laws against this idea of this leper being in public, but he's choosing to come out boldly. Let's see, he says, and the leper came to Jesus and bowed before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, make me clean. He wanted to be clean. And so he comes to Jesus. He wanted to be cleansed of this leprosy. Of course, again, leprosy is a picture of sin. It's a type of sin in the Bible. This guy wanted to be free from this sin, if you will, this leprosy. And it says so he comes to Jesus, if you're willing. So there's where a lot of people are in misunderstanding. They know Jesus has the power. They know that Jesus has the authority. But is he willing? And so some people are reluctant to come into church or to be in a service because of their sin, of their leprosy. They're afraid of being ostracized. They're afraid of what people might think of them. And so they don't want to come. But, the healing takes place when we come to Jesus. And so sometimes we think our sin is too great. We've gone too far. But if you're walking, there's still a chance. And this leper, he's still walking. He's coming to Jesus. He sees this opportunity. He sees the chance. But are you willing? He asked Jesus. If you're willing, I know you can, but are you willing? And Jesus goes on and says to him, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. Jesus didn't have to touch him. We're going to see it in actually the next miraculous healing. He doesn't have to stretch out and touch him. But he chooses to. He wants to touch this man that no one else wants to touch. No one else wants to be around. He reached out and touched him. And again, sometimes we think our sin is too great. The stench is too strong. That Jesus somehow offended by us. But this guy comes to Jesus. And he asks him to heal him. And Jesus reaches out to him to touch him. This man needed a touch. Not simply for the physical healing, but he needed a touch. He needed to be touched by God. And again, a lot of people will say, well, Jesus can't be in the presence of sin. But here we got this leper. There's another misunderstanding. Jesus can't be in the presence of sin. God cannot be in the presence of sin, as if he's somehow offended because of our sin. Well, I just can't be around that. But we've seen in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve were in the garden. God knew that Adam and Eve had sinned. And here comes God walking in the cool of day. He wanted to be with Adam and Eve. It was they who didn't want to be with Jesus or with God. And so that's us. We don't want to be in the presence of God because of our sin, because of our condition. But Jesus wants to be with you. He's willing to reach out to you. He's willing to touch you. And he's reaching out to this guy with this odor, this stench that's, we don't know what exactly he looked like, but possibly missing maybe even his nose. We don't know. It would have been a horrific sight. But Jesus, he's not offended by that. He's not offended by our condition. He wants to heal. He wants healing to take place. He wants you to be delivered of your leprosy, of your sin condition. He wants to. And so he reaches out and he says, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. You can be cleansed. It says, and immediately this leper was cleansed of his leprosy. You can immediately, instantaneously be cleansed, be washed, be set free. But do you want to? See, this is where a lot of people are. They're in this sin condition, and it's caused all kinds of horrific things in their life. And, it's destroying them. And so they don't want the situation or the circumstance they're in. They want to be delivered from the circumstance, you see. They want to be delivered from the trouble, but they don't want to let go of that sin. See, they don't want to let go. They love the sin. Even though the sin is destroying their lives, destroying relationship. I see this in drugs all the time. People just don't want to let go. Oh, they're upset for where it's brought them. They got them into jail. They got them in, they've lost their job. They've lost their family. They don't want that. They're sorry for that, but they don't want to let go of the sin. They don't want to let go of the drug. They don't want to let go of whatever's got a hold of them. They don't like what it's done to them, but they don't want to let go. You see, if you want to let go, Jesus can cleanse you completely, totally. He can take it away, and you can be healed. Behold, John said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. He takes it out of the way. He has cast, he casts our sin as far as the east is from the west. Eternally separated. But do we want to let it go? See, we can be washed. We can be cleansed completely, totally, immediately. But do you want to let it go? And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one. Now that's awesome. Oftentimes very curious to people why Jesus would not want this leper telling anyone about his cleansed condition. And I believe one of the reasons, and as the reason I give today, I've seen, we've just Wednesday night we were discussing this, but I believe one of the reasons is Jesus didn't want a circus-like atmosphere. He came to proclaim the gospel message. He came to proclaim truth to people. He didn't want the ministry just to be about the healing. He wanted people to be healed, but the healing takes place with the word, with the message, you see. And so that's oftentimes what we're trying to put ahead of the game. We want to see the miracles take place, but the miracles comes through the gospel. You know, we were talking about the gifts and callings. You know, there's actually three categories. There's the gifts of the Spirit, there's the gifts of the minister of Jesus, and then there's also the gifts of God. Jesus gives us a ministry, and we exercise our gift in that ministry, and the manifestation is what's coming from God. The manifestation is oftentimes speaking in tongues. It can be healing. It can be all kinds of things that's taking place. But we got to be focused on what God has called us to do. And so Jesus is focused upon the gospel message. The healing is a result of that. The healing comes through the gospel message. The miracles come from the gospel message. You know, someone could be living on the street in eating out of garbage cans. And there can be a miraculous thing that takes place in their life when they hear the gospel and hear the love of God. They can be transformed. That's miraculous things that take place. Somebody's completely encased in their leprosy, in their sin, and they're just completely destroyed by it. They can be miraculously set free from that. But it comes through the gospel. Here's another one. See to it that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the priest and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So that this was forewritten. And I think it was for this specific leper, because Leviticus 14 actually says, in the day of the leper's cleansing. And I think that's why Jesus is telling them, go to the priest. You know, there were certain requirements that it had to be verified. Don't tell anybody, just go to the priest. Don't make this public yet, just go to the priest. And because it was a fulfillment of that Old Testament prophecy, I believe. Jesus said, go tell the priest, show them what's happened here. Leviticus 14 says, in the day of the leper's cleansing. So it's a fulfillment of prophecy. And again, this is to demonstrate His power and His authority in everything that He said and done up to this point. And picking up in verse 5. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, where are they at? Capernaum. This becomes important here in the next healing. Capernaum. So this is Jesus' headquarters. It's a beach town. What a great place to be headquartered, right? Out by the ocean, the surfs and the sunshine. But again, I just drawing that out because it becomes significant here in a few more verses. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, imploring him. A centurion was a leader of 100. Centurion. So he was a man of authority, and as he goes on to explain himself, he was in today's military, he would be like a master sergeant. He was a leader of 100. And by the way, whenever you see a centurion, in spite of what the images of a lot of TV shows, concerning the cruelty of the Romans, in Scripture, a centurion is never presented in a bad light. Never once. They're always presented in a good light. So this centurion going on to say, and when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, imploring him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion said, Lord, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Just say the word. Speak the word, and my servant will be healed. And, oftentimes here's another thing. Oftentimes we hear, just speak the word, brother. Just name it and claim it. Just speak the word. And if you have faith, it will happen. But you got to understand, it's not the word that is being spoken. It's who is speaking the word. And who's the one with the authority? Who's the one with the power? It's Jesus. He says, Lord, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. So he's one, he says, I recognize authority. And by the way, there was another Roman centurion at the foot of the cross. We're told that Jesus gave up the ghost. And before he gave up the ghost, he says, and Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And he cried out with this loud voice, it is finished. It was a very authoritative voice. It is finished. He cried out, we're told by Luke. At the foot of the cross was this Roman centurion. And what was his response when he hears these words of Jesus? He said, truly, this man is the Son of God. Now we got another centurion. And he says, I recognize authority. You see that man at the foot of the cross? He recognized the authority of Jesus' voice. It is finished. It wasn't some sort of tragic end. It was a victory cry that was spoken out with great authority. And so the centurion, he's the one who recognizes authority. He recognizes, hey, Jesus says it, it happens. This is a man of authority. And so the centurion says, I understand authority. Verse 10, now when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following him. He marveled. There's only 2 times that we're told that Jesus marveled. Here, and he's marveling over this man's faith. But we're also told that he marveled at, when he came to his own people. And they did not believe. And he marveled at their unbelief. So the centurion comes to Jesus. He said, just say the word. And he recognizes the authority of Jesus. And Jesus says, this guy, he marvels at him. He says, and when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. This is a centurion. This is a Roman. This is a Gentile. What's a Gentile? A Gentile is anyone who is not a Jew. There were 3 groups of people that the Jews looked down upon. First was the leper. The leper, in their eyes, this guy is condemned. He's cursed of God. He has no hope. And so, the next group was Gentiles. Gentiles were considered nothing but fodder for the fires of hell. Gentiles were looked down upon as, also God doesn't want these people. God does not like these people. So you had the leper, who was obviously condemned because of their condition. Then you had the Gentiles, who were nothing but fodders for the fires of hell. And the third group of people that you have is women. To the Jewish man, the religious man, the women served one purpose and one purpose only: procreation. They produced children. And so, and by the way, like when a woman was pregnant and her time was coming due, when the contractions began, all of her family, friends, and neighbors would come together, and they'd be at the house. They'd bring their gifts in, and they'd be waiting, waiting to see if this is going to be a boy or a girl. If it was a boy, well then, all kinds of excitement would break out. There'd be celebration in the house. If it was a girl, they'd take their gifts and leave, because it was all about the women. So now we've got this centurion, this Roman, this Gentile. And what did Jesus just say? What did they just hear? I haven't seen anyone like this in all of Israel. Who does that include? He goes on to tell us a couple of guys here: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This includes Moses. This includes, anyone who was born of the Jewish nation. These great men of faith: Isaiah, Ezekiel. He says, truly I have not found such great faith in anyone in all of Israel. He says, this is a man of faith. What's the point here? We have three stories. We're about to get to the third one here. The very first three miracles that Jesus performed are miracles that include a leper, a Gentile, and a woman. Jesus is declaring something here. He's declaring that he says salvation, the kingdom of heaven, is available to anyone, including lepers, those that's cursed of God, to women, those who's looked down upon by man, and to Gentiles who are nothing but fodder for hell. And he says, I've not seen any faith like this in anyone in Israel. Anyone. That doesn't exclude anyone. Or it includes everyone. So he says, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, lepers, Gentiles, and women will be in heaven. No one's looked down upon by God. No one's unreachable by God or from God. He says there's going to be people in heaven. But notice what he goes on to say here. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness. There's going to be Gentiles. There's going to be lepers. There's going to be women. And by the way, some of the men of Israel is going to be cast out. Some of these great religious scholars are going to be cast out. They're going to be in outer darkness. They're going to be cast into hell, is what he's saying. That was scandalous. That must have what did Jesus just say? Lepers are included in the kingdom. Gentiles are going to be included in the kingdom. Women are upheld in the kingdom. They're going to be sitting down at the table of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He says, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness, and in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done for you as you believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. Verse 14. When Jesus came into Peter's home, okay, where are they at? Capernaum. Where was Peter's home originally? Mark chapter 14 or chapter 4 tells us Bethsaida. But now he's been called into this ministry. You see, when Jesus moves to Capernaum, Peter decides, I'm moving to Capernaum with him. So he leaves everything, lock, stock, and barrel. He moves to where Jesus is. He left a flourishing, successful business to follow Jesus. He left his friends, his family, to follow Jesus. See, oftentimes what we do is that we leave where Jesus has us to go to a business because of the prosperity. To change jobs, to be in a business because of the prosperity. In other words, Jesus is good, Jesus is great, I'm a follower of Jesus, but if the money pays better over here, I'm going there. That's how oftentimes we see Jesus. But Peter decides that he's going to go where Jesus goes, and he leaves everything forward. Which, by the way, I'm also reminded of a man who, when it came time to choose a location to raise his cattle, he looks up. He looks across the field, the plains, and he sees this lush, green, fertile pasture land. That's a great place to raise cattle. So he chose to go that direction because it was a great place to raise cattle. You know who this man was? Lot. Where was this place located? right next to Sodom and Gomorrah. You see, it was a great place to raise cattle, but it wasn't a good place to raise children. See, often as we're basing things upon physical, material prosperity. But Peter wasn't like that. He says, no, I'm going where Jesus is, even if it costs me everything. He gave up everything to follow after Jesus. And when he came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law laying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and waited on him. Notice it says Peter's mother-in-law. Who do the Catholics believe the first pope was? Peter. And of course, a pope must take this vow of celibacy, but yet Peter, the very first pope, was married. Just something to point out here. But he touched his mother-in-law, Peter's wife's mother, and immediately she gets up and begins to wait upon him. That is just a natural response, you see, when we're touched by Jesus, when we're set free from the circumstances and the bondage of our sin. If we've really been touched by Jesus, the natural response is to serve, is to love him. Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. One of the ways we love him is by serving him, by ministering to those that he's given to us within a ministry. His mother-in-law just immediately gets up and begins to serve, begins to wait on him. When evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were ill. So he cast out the spirits with a word. And again, it's not necessarily the word that was being spoken, but who was speaking the word. And it's the one who became flesh. It's the word who became flesh. And that all were healed, and healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. Again, these chapters that we're looking at, and we're finishing up a bit early this morning, but the chapters that we're going to be looking at, this is all to give prophecy of who Jesus was, but not only that, to demonstrate his power and authority, that he has the power, he has the authority to take away our sin. He has the authority to bring about healing within our souls, our minds, our spirits, and even in our bodies. He has the power and he has authority. I'm sorry to stop so short here, but we'll wrap it up there before we get into the next section here. We'll be picking up there next week. And again, next week we'll be having a baptism. We'll be following immediately after service. But let's go ahead and close with a word of prayer.